The Georgia Bulldogs are coming off of back-to-back national championships, so no real reason to think they can't do it again. That would obviously be the best case scenario for them, but let's talk about the worst case scenario for this team. Is it possible they could lose multiple games this season? Well, again, we're going to get into that worst case scenario and then again get back to that best case scenario. If you want to see me do this with more teams, I'll probably do some of the top teams and see how these videos do. If you want to see more teams, if you want to see a specific team, let me know which team I should do down in the comments below. So this is the schedule for Georgia. And again, coming off of a national championship, 15-0 season last year. You see this schedule and you see there's really not a lot of challenges. I mean, there are some games that maybe will wind up being somewhat competitive, but for the most part, this looks like a pretty easy schedule. I think worst case scenario, you can still give them wins over UT Martin, Ball State, UAB, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Georgia Tech. I just don't see any way that Georgia loses any of these games. So what would the worst case scenario look like? Well, the quarterback position does not produce for them. They take a big step back there. I believe it will be Carson Beck, but whoever winds up winning that starting quarterback job, they're not as good as Stetson Bennett. They struggle. They turn the ball over. Things like that. They can't really get a passing game going. I don't see any way that this team cannot run the football with their offensive line and all the backs that they have. But you could look at just the scheme. They lose their offensive coordinator. Mike Bobo comes in. Will they take a step back just schematically on that offensive side of the ball? That's a question mark. Defensively, I mean, they're always so good. Kirby Smart always has this team coached up. The roster is loaded. Maybe no one develops on that defensive line and they don't get that guy on that defensive line potentially, but they've got plenty of talent there. I mean, there's really just no question marks on defense. Injuries, I guess, could possibly pile up and cause some problems, but even then, the depth on this team, it's unreal. So, I mean, there's really not much chance that Georgia struggles on defense, but injuries, I guess, would be the one thing. But offensively, yeah, there are some question marks. There's no guarantee this team is going to be as good on that side of the ball. But still, if we're talking worst case scenario, realistically, now, obviously, everything goes wrong. You could possibly lose all 5 of these games. But realistically, and that's kind of the approach I want to take here, realistically, can you see Georgia losing to South Carolina at home? I know Spencer Rattler's coming back, but talent-wise, Georgia just still has a big advantage there. Auburn, it is on the road. It's at Jordan-Hare. Crazy things have happened, but is Hugh Freeze going to get that team turned all the way around in 1 year from a point of not even making it to a bowl game to being able to beat one of the best teams in the country? I don't see that happening. Florida, they still got a ways to go. Just not really seeing a lot there from the Gators to make me think that they could really win that game. Again, it's a rivalry, so you never know with Auburn and Florida, and that's why I didn't put those games in the green. Ole Miss will have an offense. They're going to be able to score points. That one could be a little bit tricky, but still, I think Georgia is clearly just the better team, more talented team. It's hard to see them losing that game. And then Tennessee on the road, this is the toughest game. I mean, you're playing on the road, very tough environment, a team that is also going to be able to score a lot of points. That's the difference with the Ole Miss and Tennessee games. The Tennessee game is on the road, and I think they're going to be better than Ole Miss too, even though I think they're going to be similar teams. So, yeah, worst case scenario, they lose one of these games, I guess. So that's what I'm going to say. Worst case scenario, and it's not necessarily Tennessee. I don't want to get too hung up on that. But I think 11-1 would be their worst case scenario. Let's say they do beat Tennessee, but they trip up against Ole Miss. Or maybe even on the road at Auburn, again, tough place to play. But I just do not see this team losing more than one game. Now, you go beyond that, 11-1, a lose to Tennessee. Maybe you don't go to the SEC championship because of the schedule. You don't go to the playoff, although I still think they'd probably be in, depending on what happens around the rest of the country. Let's say they lose somewhere else, though. They beat Tennessee. They go to the SEC championship. They lose in the SEC championship. And that also would be a worst-case scenario because in that scenario, probably not going to make it to the playoff if you got 2 losses and you don't win your conference championship. So that would be the worst-case scenario. I have a hard time seeing Georgia not making it to the playoff. Again, if they go 11-1, the loss probably comes to Tennessee. They probably don't have to play in the SEC championship. They probably get in. If they go undefeated, they lose in the SEC championship. Probably doesn't matter. They're probably going to get in that way also. So, I mean, Georgia almost a lock to make it into the college football playoff. They would need to lose really to a team outside of Tennessee, go to the SEC championship, and lose again. That's about the only way I can see this team not making it to the college football playoff, unless they do go 11-1, they don't go to the SEC championship, and there are just 4 really, really good contenders, one-loss conference champions ahead of them, which is possible, but probably unlikely. So let's talk about the best case scenario. I mean, it's 12-0. It's obviously 12-0. Going beyond that, it's winning the SEC championship. It's winning both playoff games, winning a national championship. Yes, this team is good enough to do it again. Not saying that they will, but there's no reason to think that they can't. And like I said, best case scenario clearly for them, 15-0 again, national championship again, and another perfect season, capping off a three-peat, which would just be insane. I don't know if they can do it. I mean, it's tough. It's going to be tough, and you've got a lot of other really good teams this year. But everything does point towards them at least getting to the playoff. And if they get in, they just have to win a couple of games. And, of course, they're going to be right there again as a national champion. So what is your best and worst case scenario for Georgia? Again, 12-0 best case, 11-1 worst case. If you went with the absolute worst case, injuries all over the place, something crazy happens to this team, even still, I think 7-5, that's the absolute worst case scenario. But I'd love to get your thoughts, best and worst case scenarios for Georgia in 2023.